Hello and welcome back to the channel for episode 14 of The One Report. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, this episode is 1 day delayed. Usually we are here every Monday morning, UK time that is, to talk about the week's biggest talking points regarding One Championship. As it happens, the biggest talking point that we've had in quite some time regarding One Championship came out yesterday with the news that Rodtang will be fighting Takeru at the Saitama Super Arena in March at 1172. So thought that was a bit more pressing to get out, and that would have dominated the episode of The One Report anyway. And there's a lot to get to. Well, you know, there's quite a lot. I think that there's probably multiple things that we could have done here in terms of a main topic for this episode. Instead, we'll kind of scatter the topics around instead of spending loads of time on one particular topic instead, if that makes sense. Thank you for being here. As always, make sure you drop this channel a subscribe. We're getting near that 1,000 subscribers mark, so I'd really appreciate that. Drop the video a like, all that good stuff. Grab yourself a hot drink or something like that. I've got here a coffee that is far too hot for me to drink, so I will probably be drinking that throughout this episode instead. Let's get into it. And we are going to start with a few fight announcements that have been added to 171 in Qatar. Is the promotion's return to the Lusail Sports Arena for the second time following 1166 earlier this year. Let's pull this up here. There you have it, February 20th. On the previous episode of The One Report, no, was it on The One Report? No, it was a separate video. I did a separate video on it, didn't I? So you can check that out on this channel if you want to hear my thoughts on the top two title fights that will headline this card. That will be Jonathan Haggerty defending the bantamweight kickboxing title against China's Wei Ray, and you also have the strawweight title unification trilogy fight. That is a mouthful to say, isn't it? Between Joshua Pasio and the interim champion Jared Brooks. Like I said, already gave my thoughts on that fight, on those two fights, I should say. And we also already gave our thoughts on this bottom fight here between Martin Nguyen and Shamil Gasanov that will take place in the featherweight MMA division. Potentially a title eliminator. Winner of this fight goes on to fight the winner of Tang Kai versus Akbar Abdullayev, which is coming up at the start of 2025, One Fight Night 27. We'll talk about that card in a little bit because we've had some fight announcements for that one as well. I really like that fight, Martin Nguyen, Shamil Gasanov. Gasanov looked good against Halil Amir. I think this is a logical next step for him. You know, if he beats a former champion in Martin Nguyen, then I don't think there can be any denying that he would be deserving of a title shot. His only loss in one is to Gary Tonon, who, if you stay up to date with One Championship news, then you'll probably know that Gary Tonon, I don't think, will be fighting for quite some time in One Championship. Kind of feels like that relationship has come to an end, and Shamil has beaten everybody else that he's been put in front of. And like, you know, I have said this already in the recap of One Fight Night 26 that we did on the One Report, that Halil Amir is a guy that I rate pretty highly in terms of one's MMA. And so for Shamil to go out there and beat him in pretty decisive fashion, I thought was very impressive. And yeah, like I said, beating a former champion in Martin Nguyen would be a next logical step for him. Martin Nguyen, you know, if he beats Shamil, does he go straight into a title shot? I'm not sure, but I can see the argument for doing it, you know, in terms of the matchup that it could be. You know, if you have, say, Akbar Abdullayev go out there and beat Tang Kai for the world championship, I think him and Martin Nguyen makes a lot of sense in terms of Akbar is one of the newer guys. He's been finishing everybody. To see him go up against a former champion, a legend of One Championship in Martin Nguyen, who's been there and done it all, that makes a lot of sense. I think even if Martin is only coming off of the one win, that is right. I think was his last fight the loss to Gary Tonon in January. Yeah, it was 1165, where he got submitted in the first round. So I think that would make sense. It's only one win, but considering the pedigree that he has, it would be a big opportunity for Akbar Abdullayev to get a name like Martin Nguyen on his record. So I think that would make sense. I mean, I think you could still even argue it if Tang Kai defends the belt, even. You know, like I said, Martin Nguyen is a legend of One Championship. So to have him go up against one of the newer faces of One's MMA roster, I think does make a lot of sense. And, you know, beating Shamil is probably the best win that you can get right now in this division outside of beating the two guys who are involved in that main event of One Fight Night 27. And it seems like One Championship is going in on the MMA for this card, which was pretty similar to what they did in Qatar last time out. I think that that makes a lot of sense, honestly, for the Qatar kind of for this kind of event, for the market that it's potentially appealing to. I think it makes sense to do this. I wouldn't be surprised to get a couple of Muay Thai, kickboxing, submission grappling fights on this card, but I do expect it to be predominantly MMA, which I'm not mad at. I think that if you are going to do that on any of these big cards that one have coming up, this one makes the most sense. Of course, we've got 170, that is at the Impact Arena in Bangkok. You would imagine that that will be very striking heavy, although we do have Fabricio Andrade defending his Bantamweight MMA World Championship on that card. But the two top fights on that card are two of the best striking matchups that we have. You obviously have this event in Qatar, and then you have the event in Japan, which you will imagine will be quite striking focused, with a lot of Japanese talent on that card as well. Although, again, we do have a MMA title fight announced for that card already with Adriano Moraes versus Yuya Wakamatsu for the vacant flyweight belt. Good to see a lot of MMA being booked early on in 2025. That makes me happy because the MMA roster, as I'm sure a lot of you guys will know, has been kind of less of a priority, I think is fair to say, in the last year or two in one championship. And so I just, I'm happy to see these guys getting fights and big, meaningful fights as well. Talking of big, meaningful fights, Viviano Fernandez versus Kevin Bellingham in the Bantamweight MMA division. A fight that nobody saw coming. A fight that I don't really know if we need, but I did see, I believe it was in MMA Fighting's report of this fight being announced. It could have been MMA Junkie. I should have pulled that up, so apologies on that if I'm getting that wrong. Who said that it would be a retirement fight. I kind of imagined it would be that anyway. When you look at what these two guys have been doing, their legacy in terms of their previous fights together, where they're at in their careers, I think it makes a lot of sense for this to be a retirement fight. And on that basis, I think that makes a lot more sense. I don't need to see this fight happen and then one of these guys go on to fight like a top contender or something like that. But if this is going to be, the last dance, go out against a former rival from their career, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, how old is Bibiano now? 44. That is absolutely crazy. His last fight was against Stephen Lohman, but that was, 2 years ago at this point. And Bibiano was coming off of the loss to John Lineker, so he was still very much at the top of that division. Before then, he fought Kevin Bellingham 3 times in a row. He won the last 2 after losing the first one by a split decision. The second one was a disqualification. So, kind of a win for Bibiano, but also makes sense to do a trilogy off the back of that. And Bibiano got the submission in that one before, like I said, going on to fight John Lineker. And I don't believe Kevin has fought since then. Oh no, he has. My apologies. He fought 2 times after. Oh, and obviously the John Lineker fight as well. Yeah. All right. My apologies. I'm getting that completely wrong. Yeah, but 3 losses. Since the 2 losses to Bibiano, so 5 losses in a row. Again, one of them by DQ, so that is what it is. But yeah, I don't really need to see this fight. I can't say I'm too excited for it, but if this is, the final fight of both guys' careers, then I think that makes a lot of sense. And with that context, I understand it. Put it on this card, give them a nice moment. I get that. Speaking of nice moments, we have the return of Dagi Aslan Aliyev taking on Roberto Soldic. I can never get Dagi's name right, so I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation. But both of these guys, we've wanted to see them back in MMA for quite some time, and we finally have them back. Dagi Aslan Aliyev, of course, competed last time out in a grappling match against Ty Rotolo at One Fight Night 13 in one of those MMA versus submission grappling matchups that we just didn't really need to see. It was not the most entertaining contest. I dropped my pen there if you were wondering why I just dipped out of a camera shot there. But of course, known for being a contender in the lightweight MMA division. And he will be coming back at welterweight to face off with Roberto Soldic, who has had a tough run of results in one championship. He has fought 2 times. The first one was against Murad Ramazanov, who, of course, is no longer in the promotion. That ended in the first round due to a no contest. So that went brilliantly. And then his second fight against Sebastian Kadastam at One Fight Night 10 was an incredible fight, but, of course, one that he lost. And he was stopped in the second round by Kadastam, who I think if one championship was kind of in its groove at that point in time, we would have seen Kadastam go on to challenge Christian Lee for the welterweight title, but of course Christian Lee wasn't fighting at the time, and then it took a while for Christian Lee's comeback to happen, and then you had him come back at lightweight to face Alibeg, so everything's kind of been pushed back and back and back, and now I don't know where Kadastam stands in this division. If you put him into a title shot right now, you know, if they announced we're not doing the Alibeg Razulov Christian Lee rematch after what happened in their fight in December, the no contest there, I think a lot of One fans would be like, yeah, Kadastam deserves this, former champion, beat Roberto Soldic. He has long deserved this opportunity. But I think it would be a little bit, it would come out of left field a little bit at the same time because it's been so long since we've seen him. And yeah, but simple fact of the matter is this run has not worked out for Roberto Soldic yet. But I was incredibly excited to see him join One Championship. Genuinely one of the top fighters in Europe when he was in KSW. Incredibly exciting fighting style, some very impressive wins and performances. Of course, you know, I know that a lot has changed since then, but of course does hold a win over the current UFC middleweight champion, Dricus du Plessis. He does also have a loss to du Plessis. So, you know, was it a loss or did Soldic win the decision? I know that he finished him in the second fight, but I actually can't remember now how that first fight went. I'm questioning my own facts. Let me pull this up because I want to make sure I get this right. And also, I just genuinely can't remember. But I love watching Roberto Soldic. Like I said, it has not worked out for him, but I have faith, you know. He did lose. Yeah, he did get stopped in that first fight with Dricus, and then he came back and stopped him in the rematch for the KSW welterweight title. Went on a crazy run of finishes and consecutive wins after that loss to Dricus as well, I believe. Yeah, big fan of Roberto Soldic. Glad to see him back. You know, I can't... it's so tough because he's on a tough run of form. Turning that around when he hasn't been active for, you know, well, he fought in May last year, so it's already been over a year and a half. So you're looking at close to 2 years by the time that this Qatar event happens. It's going to be tough for him to turn around this form when he's not being active, which I don't think is his decision. So I'm not blaming Roberto Soldic for that. But yeah, this is one of those fights where glad to see both guys back. I would love to be able to see Roberto Soldic fight more often. And, you know, it sucks that we don't get to see that. But maybe now is not the time to complain about that because we do have him back. And hopefully this is the start of a new chapter for Roberto Soldic where he can turn around his form and get back to winning ways and hopefully get back to fighting more regularly as well. That'll just about do it. We have those 5 fights announced for Qatar. Interested to see what else they put on this card because if you look at those 5 fights, I mean, that looks like a main card to me. I mean, I know that One Championship, they do have a kind of main card and then a prelim card, but it, in terms of the way that it all plays out, it kind of more plays out as just one big card. But when you look at those 5 fights, I can't really see a world in which you have the likes of Bibiano and Kevin Bellingham going too far down the card. Same for Martin Nguyen and Shamil Gasanov. So I think that looks like that could be the top 5 fights on this card. All MMA, I think it makes sense. Wouldn't be surprised if there was a submission grappling title fight announced for this card, you know, for one to really go big on the whole, you know, representing all the different disciplines that they house under the one roof. But yeah, I think that going all MMA is not a bad idea for this card either. Let's switch the screen over here so that we can take a closer look at One Fight Night 27. which goes down on January 11th at Lumpini Stadium in Bangkok. We have the 2 title fights announced for this card. It will be Tankai defending the featherweight MMA World Championship against Akbar Abdullayev in one of the best MMA matchups that one has put together in quite some time. Might be, I've already discussed this a bunch of times, so we're not going to go too far into it, but it might be the best MMA fight that one could possibly put together right now, given their roster. Maybe a Kadastan versus Christian Lee, or even a Roberto Soldic. I know Soldic has not been on a good run of form, but I would be incredibly excited to watch Roberto Soldic versus Christian Lee. That would be, yeah, maybe that would top it, especially if Soldic is coming off of a win. But either way, we've already talked about that, and we've definitely already talked about Denise Zamboanga versus Aliana Rasahina. Also announced for this card, we have the return of Luke the Chef Lisi. I'm covering up his opponent here, who doesn't have a picture, so I don't know too much about Cody Jerome. I believe he came through like one of the Road to One tournaments. Is that what they're called? Am I thinking of Road to UFC? It's called Road to One, right? I think he came through something like that. I did remember seeing about that. So, some really, really fun striking matchups to this card. I mean, Rambo Lek versus, I don't know how to say that surname, so we're just going to call him Param. I don't even know how to say the first name. We'll go with Param. That's a fun fight. I know that people are excited to watch Param do his thing after his performances on Friday Fights. He's developed quite the winning streak on Friday Fights. So excited to see how he does against a pretty seasoned guy in Rambo Lek, who we have seen on some impressive performances in recent times, especially. I remember that win over Craig Coakley in particular. And, I quite like the fact of one putting some of these Friday Fights guys just onto the main roster here to kick off the new year. It kind of feels like we're getting some fresh blood on some of these bigger fight night cards. So I like that a lot. And in terms of Luke Lisi, I would watch this guy fight a heavy bag for 25 minutes. So I will watch this guy fight literally anybody, even if they are a yet to be unlocked character in a fighting game. I would watch that too. I would watch him fight a mystery opponent. We also have John Lineker. No, sorry, we already have that announced, didn't we? John Lineker versus Kulabdan. What a fight that is! That is absolutely bananas. I can't wait for that one. Tommy Langacker versus Dante Leon. Won't spend too much time on this because I know the submission grappling isn't for everybody. I really like this matchup. I think this makes tons of sense. Dante Leon called for this matchup after his debut at One Fight Night 26, where he submitted Bruno Pucci. Makes a ton of sense. Tommy Langacker is a top contender in this division. I think that in some ways, obviously, the lightweight belt is held by Cade. I don't know how much Cade is going to be grappling over the next year, because it kind of seemed like this would be the point where he would really focus on MMA. I know that he was still like, I'm not going to vacate the belt. I will defend it. So maybe Cade faces the winner here, although it's quite hard to argue for him facing Tommy Langacker for a third time. Their other 2 contests have been pretty similar, so I don't really see that being a possibility, but who knows? If he goes up there and submits Dante Leon, then maybe there's an argument for it. And I definitely think that Dante Leon will get a title shot, or, I don't know. I think we're going to have a serious conversation with Cade about how often he's going to be defending this belt. I don't really see them taking it off him unless he is like, you can, because I'm not going to defend it. Cade is such a great spokesperson, figurehead for one's submission grappling, one of the most talked about, most, hyped grapplers in the sport today. So to have him as your lightweight champion is a good bonus for one. So it'd be hard to imagine them taking the belt off him. But, if Dante Leon goes out there and submits Tommy Langacker, then he is a serious threat to that title. So interesting to see what they do from there. Couple of MMA bouts here. Aaron Kanate versus the returning Timothy Nasyukin. Love to see that. The return of Chihiro Sawada against Mengbo. Love that as well. Big fan of Chihiro Sawada. So excited to see how that one ends up playing out. And also we have Suar Black versus Dmitry Kovtun from Russia. A classic Thailand versus Russia matchup that we have had a bunch of as of late. And that's a fun fight too. So this fight night card looks, I wouldn't say it's on the level of a One Fight Night 26 that we had at the start of December, but in terms of, especially if you look at the fight night card that we had to kick off this year in January, this one is far better. I'm pretty excited for this card. My thoughts probably already on Tankai versus Abdullayev. I am absolutely in love with that matchup. And Yeah, I mean, Lisi, one of my favorite guys to watch in one championship. Submission grappling matchup here with actual stakes. Love that. Kulabdan versus John Lineker is bonkers. The return of Nasyukin, Chihiro Sawada back in the mix. Yeah, really good card. Very, very excited for that one. We also have, in terms of, whilst we're talking about guys that we haven't seen compete in a little while, we have the news of where Sage Northcutt will be going following his departure from One Championship. Here, via MMA Junkie, Sage Northcutt will join the PFL roster in 2025 after parting ways with One Championship earlier this year. Promotion yet to make an official announcement. I don't expect them to. I think they would rather just leave this one out there. In terms of my thoughts on this, not much to say. We did already cover the news that he will be leaving One Championship. Should probably have a sip of my coffee, right? Delicious. I didn't expect it to be PFL. I mean, I did expect it to be PFL if he was going to go back to MMA. But I genuinely thought he would go to karate combat to compete in striking, which has always been his strongest skill set. But saying that, he has spent a long time during his long absence from One Championship working on his MMA. I just a thought popping into my head about, fighters in One Championship being a little bit frustrated about the lack of fights, and there's a little bit of irony there in Sage Northcutt maybe going over to the PFL, which have kind of got a similar problem going on right now with some of the guys on the Bellator roster. But I don't have any personal emotions about this. As I said at the time when we spoke about Sage leaving the promotion, it felt like the right thing to do. To just part ways at this point in time. It hasn't really worked out for One. It hasn't worked out for Sage. Go their separate ways. I think that it's a good acquisition by the PFL because I think that there will be a lot of people who maybe don't follow One Championship who remember him from the UFC. And he's a guy that, is how do I don't mean this to be like disrespectful. I'm not saying that he isn't a good fighter, but he's a good media character to have around. He's a very marketable guy. And I think that, I think this makes sense. If he was going to go and fight in MMA, the PFL would have been the clear and obvious pick there, I think. Don't think the UFC would have been too interested in having him back, at least not yet or anything like that. But it is also worth remembering that Sage is 28 at this point. So it, kind of is. I'm not going to say now or never. You get fighters who don't hit their best runner form until several years after that, 33, 34 even. By 35, it tends to get a little bit dicey. But this is kind of, now is the time for Sage to deliver on his potential, right? If he's like 26, 27, you're maybe thinking, okay, well, he's got a little bit more time. He hasn't been fighting very frequently. He's now 28. Big couple of years in store for Sage Northcutt in the PFL. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with him, whether they put him into the tournament format, give him some showcase fights first. I'm not sure. Does it say on this article, actually? No, unclear if he will compete in the PFL season or the Super Fight series. He is expected to fight at welterweight. Who was the welterweight? Do they have welterweight? Oh God, PFL's welterweight division's brutal. That's the one with Magomed Umalatov and Shamil Musayev in. Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that. Not again to disparage Sage in any way, but if you were going to ask me what is the toughest PFL bracket to enter right now, the one with Shamil Musayev and Magomed Umalatov, I would say those two guys are two of the real standouts in PFL right now, not including, if you just look at the season formats, not necessarily the super fights, because obviously Francis, Cyborg, all of those names, the Bellator champions, the likes of Patchy Mix and Usman Nurmagomedov, Paul Hughes, these guys, if you just look at the PFL season, Shamil Musayev is a beast. That is one scary individual. So if he stays in the $1 million tournament, I can see him winning that again. Honestly, he is a fantastic competitor. And last but not least, where we will end this episode of the One Report, is actually a big event that is coming up this Friday. This really crept up on me. This Big Friday Fights card. It goes down at Lumpini Stadium this weekend. Friday, of course. One Friday Fights 92. It is the big kind of, I mean, this is the big send-off from One Championship in 2024. This is our last big one. I can't really get out the way here. Oh, there you go. I believe that One Championship don't have the right. Is this the correct running order? Because it seems a little bit weird to me. I'm actually just going to check this on Twitter really quick to see if this is the correct bout order. Because I don't know, seems a little bit off to me. No, I don't know. I can't find it. Whatever. We'll go with this for now. Because I mean, for a start, on the poster is the returning Murat Grigorian. And if you look at where Grigorian is on this card, he's all the way down here. So I don't know. This card is not quite the blockbuster Friday Fight tentpole cards that we've had in the past that have had multiple title fights and things like that on them. I would imagine, I don't know this, I would imagine that there was plans to get a title fight on this card, potentially a Prajanchai, although DeBella fought recently, so did Sam A, so I don't know who you would have him fight, so maybe that wasn't on the cards. Petjija, we haven't seen this year, right? She fought oh no, she fought Giant Todd earlier this year, didn't she? So we have seen her this year, but it does feel like we're due a Petjija return at some point. Same for Alicia Helen Rodriguez. But regardless, I think this card is really good. The main event, Sitachai versus Shadow, is, it's not a title fight. It's not, like I said, this card isn't the big tempo cards that we are used to getting for these Friday Fights showcases. But in terms of the matchup quality, this main event is, could be a title fight. It's that good. Shadow, of course, coming off of a 3-fight win streak after a loss on his debut, has looked great since then. Sitachai as well. The reason this fight is so fascinating, I think, is because you have Shadow on the rise, really finding his groove in One Championship. Of course, you have Sitachai, a living legend of Muay Thai, who has a track record for welcoming the new guy and beating him and keeping his place in the division. And there is no better example than that, of that, I should say, than his last fight against the debuting Masaki Nori, who I thought Sitachai looked great in that fight, looked back to his best even. So Shadow has got a tough test here. This is a Sitachai that doesn't look like he's going anywhere just yet, even if he has had some losses as of late to some of the other top guys, Murat Grigorian, of course, Mohamed Siasarani, who Shadow just beat. So, yeah, really, really good fight. I love this main event. I think it's fantastic. In terms of other fights that are really, really, going to get me excited ahead of this card, it's kind of hard to preview Friday Fights cards. It's why I don't tend to do it, apart from these big tempo ones, because I could go through all of these matchups and be like, yeah, this guy's done it. All of these fights are going to be entertaining. All of these fights are going to be worth watching. I don't need to tell you, make sure you tune into this one. Watch Friday Fights. It's always fantastic. You always get crazy fights. You always get crazy knockouts. These fights will all be great. The return of Pampayak, of course, I'm going to tune in for. He recently made his return on a Friday Fights card where he beat Silvio Vitez. Didn't look at his best. So interesting to see how he gets on here against a Russian opponent, which, has been a little bit of a difficult thing for some of these top guys in One Championship. These Russians, man, they don't come to play around. So we'll see how Pampayak gets on. I would expect him to come through, but I'm still interested to watch it because I want to see whether he looks better than he did last time out. Not that he looked bad, but he just didn't look like the Pampayak of old, which is understandable considering how long he was out of the ring. We do have the return of Murat Grigorian, one of my favorite kickboxers to watch in the world. His style is so much fun. Of course, coming off of that loss to Superbon earlier this year in the interim featherweight kickboxing world championship fight, Superbon in a great run of form. Looked fantastic in that fight. So, I mean, when you look at Gregorian's three recent losses, his three last losses, Superbon, Chingizalzov, Superbon. These are kind of the only two guys that he loses to, and they are right at the top of the pound for pound list. So no shame in that whatsoever. It only speaks to the strength of the featherweight division in one, although this fight will be at a catchweight as he takes on Morocco's Abdelali Zahidi. I think we got that right. Fingers crossed we did. Who made his one championship debut in November. Didn't say that right, did I? In November with a knockout win over Tun Ming Ang. Might have got that one wrong. It happens. We also have the return of Masaki Noiri. I'm excited to watch Noiri. I thought that whilst he didn't get the win against Sitachai, it was a very fun fight, fun performance. Even though I didn't think he looked particularly great, didn't really seem like he had an answer for Sitachai striking off of the back foot. But we'll see if he can, really kick on here and get a debut win in one championship. And you would imagine he is a absolute given for the Japan card, 1172 at the Saitama Super Arena. You could say the same thing, I think, for Kana Morimoto, who will be making her one championship debut here against Hanisa Meksen. I'm surprised this isn't like the co-main event or something. Kana making a debut, taking on Hanisa Meksen. That's a really great kickboxing fight. Both of them have got tons of, acclaim between them. And really, really fun fight. I'm excited. And, we're going to recap all of this on Monday's episode of the One Report. So if you want to, go watch these fights and then we'll come chat about them on Monday. That's what we do here. So make sure you check that out. I will, of course, be watching Nathan Benden as a fellow Brit. Did not realize there was a guy from Japan called Shimon. Shimon? I think I'm going to stick with Shimon. It's definitely not that, but it's more fun to say, isn't it? That'll just about do it, I think, for this episode of the One Report. One Friday Fights 92 coming up this Friday. Like I said, the kind of big last show from One Championship in 2024. I don't know if they have Friday Fights the week after. I know that they sometimes take, I think last year they took the last couple of weeks off. So I'm not sure if Friday Fights is going ahead. I tend to just wait until Friday and then go, oh, Friday Fights is on. I'll watch some Muay Thai. Why not? So I'm not actually too sure. But yeah, this is definitely the last big show of the year. Not the WWE wrestler, as in a big event. But sorry, lost on a train on a different different thought. I've completely derailed this whole thing. We're gonna end it right here. Thank you for checking out this video. I appreciate the support as always. Drop a like, drop a subscribe. You can tell that we've been doing for 33 minutes and I'm starting to ramble myself out of logical thinking. I appreciate you all. Enjoy the fights. I'll see you next Monday for the One Report where we'll recap all of this good stuff. Let me know in the comments below, which fight are you most looking forward to at One Friday Fights 92? Which fight are you most looking forward to of the ones that we talked about so far on this episode that have been announced for some of these big events coming up in 2025? Until then, peace.